Let's return to This Week in America. Here's your host, Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast, This Week in America. Running with Roselle, how a blind boy and a puppy grew up and became best friends and together survived one of America's darkest days, is written by Michael Hingson. A story about a puppy who became a hero on September 11, 2001, as he led his blind companion, Michael, out of the World Trade Center from the 78th floor before its collapse. Michael has been blind since birth. Roselle had become his guide dog less than 2 years before that fateful day. Together, they inspired others during the escape, and their teamwork deemed crucial to their survival that day. For her efforts, Roselle received the American Hero Dog Award. This is a follow-up to Michael's runaway bestseller, Thunderdog, the true story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust at ground zero. Michael is an international hero, in-demand speaker, best-selling author, successful sales career, a master's degree in physics, Eagle Scout rising to the highest honor a Boy Scout can achieve, known as Vigil, a longtime social advocate for change concerning disabilities through his involvement with the National Federation of the Blind. Michael Hingson, author of Running With Roselle and Thunderdog, our guest on This Week in America. Michael, welcome to the program. A pleasure to have you with us.
Honor to be here. Thanks.
Boy, there is so much to the story, and the time is going to go by so quickly, but let's start with Running with Roselle. Give us a little bit of background. I did it in a sentence, and boy, the book is so much more. It goes into great detail and so many aspects of your life and your relationship with Roselle and what happened that day. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, we wrote Thunderdog in 2010 and 2011, and it was published, and as you said, it became a #1 New York Times bestseller. But we thought it would be relevant to write a book for kids. And actually, Susie Flory, who worked with me on Thunderdog, suggested a woman who could help write the book, Jeanette Hanscome, who had a lot more expertise in writing children's books than I. And I wanted to do the same thing with Running with Roselle that I did with Thunderdog. And that is, it wasn't really about the World Trade Center as such. It was more about teaching, in this case, children about blindness and what blindness is really about, because everyone thinks that if you're blind, you can't do stuff. It really is that if you're blind, you're not like the rest of us. You're not normal, yes. and you're not competent. The reality is that's not what blindness is all about. Eyesight isn't the only game in town. You don't need to see to do things. The issue is that we all use different devices and different technologies, and we all use different techniques to accomplish tasks. You happen to use your eyes. But the reality is, if you don't have light around, like sunlight and so on, you're in a world of hurt because you can't do things. You can't get around. You can't make things go as they should. I don't have a dependency on light. It's not a problem for me to not see with my eyes what's going on. What I do have, though, is an understanding that there are a lot of ways to accomplish tasks. And that's what I wanted Running with Roselle to teach to children. I wanted them to learn that a blind youth could grow up, a blind person could do the same things that other people can. And it might very well be that we use a guide dog. And a lot of people would say, yeah, but you have to use a guide dog. I don't have to do that. I can see. Yeah. How's that work for you when the power goes out and you don't have any light?
Exactly.
And
so you've got Roselle with you. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, you got Roselle with you to get you through those difficult circumstances.
Well, and look, let's be clear what a guide dog is about. The purpose of a guide dog is not to know where I want to go or how to get there. The purpose of a guide dog is to guide. That is, it's my job to give the dog commands when I want him or her to go forward, left, right, and so on. And I have to know how to do that, where to do that. And that means I need to be in charge of the team because we are a team. And I need to have that information so that I can give the dog commands. The dog's job is to carry out those commands and keep us safe. And that's also why I say guide dogs don't lead, they guide, because I'm the one that's leading the team and I'm the one that knows where I want to go. And I can only project that if I'm confident and competent enough to be oriented to my surroundings just like you would be. So in the case of working with Roselle, on September 11th, she did everything that I could expect her to do. She focused, she did her part of the job, And she did that because I did my part of the job. I remained calm, partly because I knew I needed to do that for her. But I also remained calm because I had spent a lot of time preparing in the World Trade Center for the, although not likely, but possibility that we could have some sort of an emergency. It had happened once before in 1993. So I, as the leader of the office I was running for Quantum Corporation, I had to know what to do because my employees weren't going to spend a lot of time studying where to go, how to do things, and so on. So it was important for me to do that. Also, my employees might very well not even be in the office when Roselle and I were there if they're out doing their jobs properly. So bottom line is, I learned what to do, and that created a mindset for me that if something happens, you've already got all the information you need to survive. It would be helpful to have more information about exactly what's going on. And I got that on September 11th. But the bottom line is I had the information I needed so I could move with confidence and as a result, keep Roselle focused so she didn't have to worry about me.
It's a fascinating story and background on what exactly a guide dog does and that relationship between you and the guide dog. Michael Hingson, our guest on the program. That's Hingson. His website, michaelhingson.com. Books available, of course, at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the usual places, and I'll give you information on both those books. We're focusing on Running with Roselle, but Thunderdog still doing quite well. People picking up copies years later on that book. It is such an inspiration. Led to Michael become, as I said, an international hero, multiple appearances on the Larry King Show. Let's go back to that day, that September 11th day. You're sitting down for a sales meeting. Something is happening. When did you understand the scope of what was happening? It wasn't just one erratic plane or one plane that was intended for its target, but multiple. When did you figure out this is bad?
We didn't really know what happened until both towers had collapsed. So what happened on September 11th at 8:45, 8:46 in the morning is that we were in my office. I had a colleague from our corporate office, David Frank, was there, and some early arrivals for sales seminars we were going to be running that day. At 8:45, suddenly we heard a muffled explosion. The building kind of vibrated, and then if you imagine my hand as the tower, literally the building started tipping in one direction. Tall buildings are flexible. They're made to be flexible to be able to be buffeted in wind storms and so on. And they can be hit by airplanes, like an airplane hit the Empire State Building in the 1940s. The difference here, of course, was it was a deliberate attack with an airplane filled with 26,000 pounds of jet fuel. It wasn't the plane that caused the building to collapse. It was the exploding jet fuel that further damaged the infrastructure of the building. But the building kept tipping, and then it eventually stopped. We thought it was going to fall to the street, but it didn't. Then it came back upright. And all that time, Roselle was asleep under my desk. But when the building got to be vertical again, I went back into my office. I met Roselle coming out from under my desk. I took her leash and told her to come around, to heel, which meant come around on my left side and sit, which she did. Then the building dropped straight down about 6 feet because the expansion joints in the building went back to their normal configuration. Picture it like a spring. Fasten the bottom of the spring to the table and then push the top of the spring over and let it go. And that's what happened. So we didn't know what happened. No one, not only in our office, but around us did, because the airplane hit 18 floors above us on the other side of the building. No one could see it. No one knew. So even so, with the building doing what it did, it was clear we had to get out. My colleague David looked outside and saw fire and smoke above us. And I heard debris falling outside the window. He said it was millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside the window. Another piece of information for me. And he was saying, we got to get out of here right now. We can't stay here. And I kept saying, slow down, David, we'll get out. And he kept saying, no, we got to get out of here. And I said, slow down. And our guests began to scream and move toward our exits. And they heard me say, slow down. So they waited. Then finally, my colleague David used the big line. You don't understand. You can't see it. The problem isn't what David was seeing and I wasn't seeing. The problem was what David wasn't seeing that I was. Namely, I knew Roselle very well. I knew what it was like when she was afraid. She didn't like thunderstorms. But Roselle was sitting next to me on my left side, calm, wagging her tail, yawning, essentially going, what woke me up? What's going on here?
Yes.
This is crazy. And so I knew that Roselle wasn't afraid, which meant that whatever was occurring wasn't such an imminent threat that we couldn't try to evacuate in an orderly way. So I finally got David to focus. I said, get our guests to the stairs. Don't let them take elevators, because I had learned as part of all the studying that I did of the World Trade Center and emergency preparedness and procedures, that in an emergency, don't take the elevator, especially if there's fire, because if the fire gets into the elevator cars, then people could be injured, and which did happen. But our guests got to the stairs and they actually got down and were going out ahead of us. David came back. I had called my wife, who hadn't even seen it on the news yet. And I told her there had been an explosion or something. We would leave and I'd let her know later. And she wanted to know more. I said, don't know anymore. David came back. We swept the offices again, and then we went to the stairs. On the way down, I smelled an odor that I realized was, after about 4 floors, the smell of burning jet fuel fumes. I traveled to a lot of airports, so I knew the smell. When I made that observation out loud, people said, yeah, you're right. That's what it is. We couldn't figure it out. So we knew an airplane hit, but Rick, we didn't know what the details were. All the way down the stairs, we didn't know what the details were, but we did know we had to work together so that we wouldn't cause anybody to panic. And that happened a few times. But bottom line is that we made it down. It got pretty crowded on the stairs. So some of the time I couldn't even hold on to Roselle's harness to follow her. It was too crowded. And so I told her to heel, which meant that she kind of stepped back a little bit. I was holding on to her leash and I was holding on to the rail on the left side of the stairs to go down. And again, guide dogs don't lead, they guide. In this case, there's no magic to going downstairs with a rail. And so we did what we needed to do. We got down to the bottom and we got out into the lobby.
I mean, it's an amazing story, and you'll read this story, Michael's story and Roselle's story, in Running with Roselle, how a blind boy and a puppy grew up, became best friends, and together survived one of America's darkest days, by Michael Hingson, our guest on the program, Hingson. This is the follow-up to the runaway bestseller, Thunderdog, the true story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust. And it's interesting, as you're describing that, you've got the falling glass, you've got everything going on around you, and terrified people. And it's interesting how you and Roselle were sort of the calming factor there, right? And trying to keep everybody, don't panic. If we all work together, we can survive this.
That was part of it. The other thing, and it's a story that doesn't get mentioned much, is at the 50th floor, my colleague David suddenly said, Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here. And I snapped at him as firmly as I could. Stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you. And he told me later that brought him out of his funk. But what he said is, I've got to put my mind on something else so I don't worry about all this. I'm going to walk a floor below you and tell you what I see on the stairs. And I said, okay, that's fine. Did I need him to do that? No, but it was helpful, and it was helpful in a way that I don't think gets mentioned much, and that's this. So I got to the 49th floor, and suddenly I hear David, 48th floor, hey, everything's good here, going on down the stairs. I get to 48. 47th floor, all clear, Mike, we're doing well. David became a focal point for anyone who could hear him, above him or below him. Literally, I think thousands of people on the stairs had to hear him say things like, hey, I'm at the 44th floor. This is where the Port Authority cafeteria is. Not stopping, going on down the stairs. He did more to keep people focused, I think, than anything else I experienced that day. And I thought that was a really cool thing to occur. But the bottom line is we all worked together to make sure that we didn't have any kind of panic, and we helped everyone get out. Of course, once we got to the bottom and we were out into the lobby, then I don't know what really occurred on the stairs. We still had power and lighting. We were all told to leave the area, but not to go outside, but rather to go through the entire complex to get to exits as far away from the towers as we could be. So people were escorted. We were escorted by somebody from the FBI who wouldn't tell us what was going on. I wish he had. I like information, but I understand why he didn't, because He didn't know me and he didn't know whether we'd panic or not. But we were escorted to an exit by the Borders books all the way on the other side of the complex. When we got outside, we saw fire in Tower 2. David said that he saw this fire. We had no idea where it came from because we didn't feel anything going down the stairs. So we got out. He saw the fire. We walked over to Broadway. We went north on Broadway, and we got to Vesey Street, where he wanted to stop, David did, to take some pictures with his camera. And I decided I'd try to call my wife again. I couldn't get through. The circuits were busy, people saying goodbye to loved ones who were trapped above the fires. And I had just put my phone away, and he was putting his camera away when a police officer yelled, "Get out of here, it's coming down now." And we heard this rumble that I constantly describe as a combination between a freight train and a waterfall. You could hear metal clattering like on a freight train, and glass breaking and clattering, and then this white noise sound of the building collapsing. There was Tower 2 coming down. David turned and ran. Everyone turned and ran. I turned and ran back the way I came and went to Fulton Street, and then took a right on Fulton Street to get a building between us and the collapsing tower. A lot of good really that would do if the building decided not to pancake down but go sideways. But there was a lot of debris falling, and I thought being between another building and the falling debris would be helpful. I ran about 25 yards and caught up to David, because it turns out that he had gone the same way. So he had realized that he had just left me and was going to try to come back and find me, but I reached him first. So we kept running, got caught in the dust cloud that was so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, as he described it. And for me, with every breath I took, I could feel dirt and debris going down my throat into my lungs. And we knew we had to get out of that cloud. So we started looking for an opening in the building that we were running next to on our right side. Suddenly I heard an opening. I had been giving Roselle commands, right. I don't know whether she could see my hand signals or hear my voice, but she must have been able to, because when we got to the opening and I heard it, and she obviously knew what I wanted, she turned right, she took one step, and she stopped, and she wouldn't move. And I kept saying, "Come on, Roselle, keep going." And she wouldn't move. Remember what I said before about the job of a guide dog. Part of what they're taught is something called intelligent disobedience. That is, if the dog feels that a command I give her isn't going to keep us safe, they have the authority to stop. And Roselle did, because we were at the top of a flight of stairs.
Wow. This is just such a fascinating story, and the time is going by way too quickly. I hope that we can have Michael back, and I hope also that you buy the book and you get the full story. Running with Roselle, How a Blind Boy and a Puppy Grew Up, Became Best Friends, and Together Survived One of America's Darkest Days. What happened to Roselle after September 11th?
So after September 11th, she continued to guide until 2007, and then retired, and then passed away on June 26th of 2011, just before Thunderdog was published. And we wrote a eulogy, which is at the beginning of Thunderdog. Larry King wrote the foreword to Thunderdog. After the day, it was suggested that I contact Guide Dogs for the Blind, where Roselle was from, because people had visited us. So I did. And they wanted to write a story that got very visible in the media, including with Larry King Live. And so on the 14th of September, we had our first of 5 interviews with Larry. And then the last interview in 2006, I asked if he would write the foreword. He said, absolutely. He did a great job. But, I wrote the book because I wanted people to learn about blindness. As I said, I wanted to help people be able to move on from September 11th and to learn about guide dogs. Ever since that day, people have been asking me to come and speak, and they want to hire me to come and tell our story, to talk about the lessons we should learn, and also to just help people learn about disabilities. In January of this year, a company reached out to me called Accessibe, Accessibe, capital B, and they said, would you help us with our products that make internet websites more accessible to people with disabilities? So I actually took a job as the chief vision officer, and now help this company that makes a scalable product that can make websites around the world accessible, not only for people who happen to be blind, but for people who have other disabilities like epilepsy, mobility impairments, and so on. So it's really pretty exciting. And so I really do urge people to visit accessibe.com. And just very quickly, there's a link on there that's called ACE. And if you click on ACE, you go to what's called a website audit tool. You can see if any website that you work with, or your own website, if you run a business, is accessible by running the ACE tool. Why is that important? Because 20% of all people in this country and around the world have a disability and are excluded from all but about 2% of websites because nobody makes them accessible. So using the ACE tool, you can see how accessible your website is or isn't, and then Accessibility can help you make it accessible and more usable very inexpensively.
You know, it's interesting. That's something else we're learning with Michael, that this could open up a whole new world for businesses out there that are excluding, not intentionally, but excluding some potential customers because it's just not accessible to people that have handicaps. I want a couple minutes left in the program. All of this, Michael and Roselle leading people literally out of the World Trade Center, a blind man and his guide dog. This all comes from a guy who, at 6 months old, doctors say to your parents, he'll never be able to do anything on his own. I mean, amazing what you've been able to do with your life.
Well, and my parents said to the doctors, "You're wrong. He can grow up to do whatever he wants." And I was very fortunate to have parents that would allow me to explore the world and would take the risk, if you will, like some people would view it, of letting me explore, letting me do whatever I wanted. I mean, for 5 years when I was born, we lived in Chicago. I'd walk around the neighborhood and so on. My parents let me do that. Most parents don't even allow blind kids to do that because they just feel that blindness is such a horrible thing. It's not. And what people need to do is to let blind children explore, give them the tools and the opportunity to grow like anyone else. And if they do that, and if they help advocate, like we talked about with Accessibility, they advocate for making tools and things accessible and usable, they'll have much better kids, and they'll have children who will truly learn to explore their environments and probably will do a better job of it than a lot of sighted kids who just sit around and play computer games and watch TV.
Well, exactly. There's so many stories and sub-stories in Michael's book, Running with Roselle. A couple of minutes left in the program. Talk just a little bit about this trust and teamwork that you had with Roselle on that day, September 11th, that led people out of the World Trade Center. It's amazing the relationship you had, the calmness both of you had, and the teamwork that you led in getting out of the Trade Center.
I love to tell people I've learned more about trust and teamwork from working with 8 guide dogs than I ever learned from all the management and leadership books in the world. And the reason is because we learn to trust each other. People talk about dogs having unconditional love. I believe that, but they do not have unconditional trust. They're open to trust, which unfortunately all too often we're not. And so it's a matter of developing the trust and developing the team relationship. As I said, we each have a job to do. Roselle's job, or now my current guide dog, Alamo, who's a black lab, their job is to make sure we walk safely. My job is to know where to go, how to get there, give firm and confident commands, but also recognize what they're supposed to do. So I could be crossing a street, suddenly the dog jerks back or moves in a way I don't expect. My first responsibility is to follow the dog. Now, there is this incredibly small chance that it was really a distraction, like a duck that the dog wanted to go visit. But these dogs don't get distracted very often. If it does, we're going to have a team meeting, and one of the team members is going to have to explain what they did.
You got some explaining to do, yes.
Yeah, but the reality is that doesn't happen. My job is to follow the dog and to have enough trust that when the dog does something I don't expect, there has to be a reason for it. Like we talked about going down the stairs at the Fulton Street subway station. It's a team relationship both ways. And that trust is a two-way trust that we develop.
So many lessons in the books, or both books, Running with Roselle, how a blind boy and a puppy grew up, became best friends, and together survived one of America's darkest days. And the original book, Thunderdog, the true story of a blind man, his guide dog, and the triumph of trust. Our guest is Michael Hingson, Hingson. Website, michaelhingson.com. Book available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places. And all this information on our website as well. Michael, it's been a pleasure, but the time has gone by even quicker than I thought it was going to. Hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, it always does, doesn't it?
We just touched the surface. Thank you so much for being with us on the program.
Would love to come back.
We'd love to have you back. It's Michael Hingson, the book Running with Roselle. Information on our website, Michael's website as well, michaelhingson.com. Back on today's program after these messages.
This Week in America is online. You can visit our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Scott Pinkerton, associate producer of This Week in America. Jay Anderson, segment producer. Ben Watson, webmaster. Otto Bechet, director of engineering and TV production. This Week in America produced and is a trademark of Blue Funk Broadcasting, LLC. For information on all of our guests and to listen to this week's show, our website again at thisweekinamerica.us. And I'm Sean Bratton, executive producer of This Week in America.